A heavy patch cycle is underway, and the priority is not simply applying updates, it is identifying where vulnerable systems sit in your environment, whether they are exposed, and whether active exploitation changes the response timeline. This briefing covers newly disclosed RabbitMQ access control flaws, a critical SAP NetWeaver ABAP vulnerability, and Microsoft's largest monthly security update to date. Welcome back. Across enterprise infrastructure, messaging platforms, business application stacks, and Windows environments, defenders are facing a high volume of remediation work. The operational challenge is to separate routine patching from issues that could enable credential exposure, cross-tenant access, data compromise, privilege escalation, or exploitation already happening in the wild. First, two access control-related vulnerabilities in RabbitMQ could leak OAuth secrets and expose metadata across tenant boundaries. Researchers disclosed the flaws in the RabbitMQ message broker service, warning that one issue can leak the broker's confidential OAuth client secret. The reported impact also includes exposure of enterprise messaging infrastructure to takeover risks and the possibility of bypassing tenant boundaries to access queue metadata. RabbitMQ is often a foundational service rather than a highly visible application. It can carry events, jobs, transactions, and internal application communications between systems. That makes an access control failure especially significant. A leaked OAuth client secret can undermine trust boundaries around the broker, while cross-tenant metadata exposure can reveal information about queue structures and messaging activity that should remain isolated. The key point is that these are not generic reliability issues. They involve authorization controls and confidential authentication material. Organizations running RabbitMQ should identify affected deployments, review vendor guidance and available remediations, and prioritize systems connected to sensitive production workloads. Defenders should also assess whether OAuth credentials used by affected brokers need to be rotated, particularly where there is any concern that secrets could have been exposed. Review access logs, administrative activity, broker configuration changes, and unusual requests involving tenant-scoped resources. Confirm that tenant isolation and least privilege permissions are implemented as intended, rather than assumed. Next, SAP has released updates for multiple vulnerabilities, including a critical flaw in SAP NetWeaver Application Server ABAP. The vulnerability, tracked as CVE 2026-44747, has a CVSS score of 9.9. It is an out-of-bounds write vulnerability affecting SAP NetWeaver ABAP. According to the advisory details, an authenticated attacker could exploit logical errors in memory management to cause memory corruption, potentially exposing or modifying data. For SAP environments, this deserves immediate attention because NetWeaver ABAP commonly supports business-critical processes and sensitive enterprise data. The requirement for authentication does reduce the exposure compared with a fully unauthenticated flaw, but it does not make the issue low risk. Organizations must consider compromised accounts, excessive privileges, internal access, and application integrations that could provide an attacker with a valid authenticated path. The Defender takeaway is to treat this as a priority remediation item. Inventory SAP NetWeaver Application Server ABAP instances, determine which systems are affected, and schedule the applicable SAP updates as quickly as operationally possible. Before and after patching, review privileged account assignments, authentication controls, and access paths into SAP environments. Monitor for unexpected changes to data, abnormal application behavior, and suspicious activity associated with authenticated users. Where patching requires a maintenance window, apply compensating controls that reduce access to affected systems and tightly restrict administrative and high-privilege accounts. Finally, Microsoft has issued updates addressing at least 570 security vulnerabilities across Windows and other products, nearly 3 times the count from the company's previous record-setting monthly release. Nearly 60 of the flaws were rated critical, meaning they could potentially enable remote takeover of Windows devices with little or no user interaction. Microsoft said the elevated patch volume reflects in part vulnerability discovery aided by artificial intelligence. Most importantly, the update addresses 3 zero-day vulnerabilities that are already being exploited in the wild. 2 of those actively exploited 0 days allow elevation of privilege on Windows systems. They include CVE 2026-56155, affecting Active Directory Federation services, and CVE 2026-56164, affecting Microsoft SharePoint. The update also addresses CVE 2026-50661, a Windows BitLocker security feature bypass that could allow access to encrypted data when an attacker has physical access to a device. That BitLocker issue has been publicly disclosed, although Microsoft said it was not aware of active exploitation. The scale of this release means defenders need a risk-based deployment plan, not an indiscriminate rush that could disrupt critical operations. Start by identifying exposed and high-value systems, especially SharePoint deployments, Active Directory Federation Services infrastructure, privileged administrative workstations, and high-trust endpoints. And devices that may face physical access risks. Prioritize the actively exploited 0 days, then critical remote code execution and privilege escalation vulnerabilities relevant to your environment. Validate patch deployment, watch for failed updates, and use endpoint and identity telemetry to look for signs of privilege escalation or suspicious activity around federation and collaboration systems. The broader message this month is clear. Patch management is becoming a larger operational discipline, not a background maintenance task. Review your asset inventory, confirm ownership of core platforms, prioritize actively exploited vulnerabilities, rotate exposed secrets where appropriate, and verify that remediation actually reached the systems that matter most. If this briefing helped your team focus its response, subscribe for more cybersecurity updates. Share this video with the people responsible for infrastructure, identity, SAP, messaging platforms, and endpoint operations, because the fastest patch is only useful when the right system gets it first.